Hey, John Gilroy here. I've done hundreds of interviews, but this is the first interview I'll do with a Cybersecurity Lifer. Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, the podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. In the virtual studio is John Pescatore, Director of Emerging Security Trends at SANS, S-A-N. Everyone knows the SANS Institute, right, John? They all know about that, huh?
We've been around so long, yeah, it's become a noun.
Yeah. Look at your title, Director of Emerging Security Trends. What kind of job is that? You got a big crystal ball in your room? Do you look into the future? Do you remote viewing? Or this must be one of the biggest challenges in the whole world, trying to figure out how they're going to attack next, huh?
Well, I joined SANS about 10 or so years ago, and they said, you need to get business cards, make up a title. So I made that one up.
Wow, emerging trends. And if you go to LinkedIn and see this guy's background, he's kind of like Forrest Gump. Been here, been in the Secret Service, been there, been kicked around here, learned this, learned that. Gartner, a whole lot of security trends. And so I see that's why SANS brought you in, because you got this, it's like an old linebacker that's limping and made a lot of tackles and knows everything, huh?
Well, through a series of random coincidences, I ended up spending almost my entire career in cybersecurity, even though it wasn't even called that for the first 20 or 30 years.
Yeah. So I live in a small town, and I could walk down to the 7-Eleven. So if I walk down to the 7-Eleven and get a Slurpee, and I randomly pick someone out walking out the door, and I say, well, what's going on with the cybersecurity hiring? I'm sure they're going to say hundreds of thousands of openings, hundreds of openings. And let's bring that up. Is that true? Is it not true? Is it a skill gap? Is it a hiring they can't hire? That's still offered as a major in universities. So what's the truth here, John?
Well, there's definitely a gap. There's definitely positions that need to be filled. I think it's been overstated quite a bit. If you ask everybody how many people would you hire, you have to ask them how many could you afford to hire at
There's
the same
a difference,
time.
huh? Yeah.
But to give you an example, and this is going to skew old to the start of my career. When I left college, I had an electrical engineering degree from the University of Connecticut. This was 1978. And the government was finding it hard to hire engineers because there was a shortage of double E's at the time. Yeah. Chips and computers were just getting started. So back then, NSA offered a $2,000 a year bonus to engineers to go work at NSA, and that attracted people. They had a gap. This is over 40 years ago. And what happened is computing used to be, remember the old days where it was mainframes and security meant keep the computers in the basement, give the users dumb terminals so they can't do anything, and nobody outside the building could even connect. So that's how federal security was kind of based on. The model for how to secure federal systems was the mainframe model. But you might remember, if you've ever seen it, it's an old movie now, but there was a great movie, a documentary essentially called Cuckoo's Nest, or The First Attack. And that was against MITRE. And through MITRE, they broke into Department of Energy Systems back in 1985. Mm-hmm. And that was because they had dial-in access. Nobody even thought about it as a risk. But some hackers in Germany found it and figured it out and went all over the place. But we were still protecting things as if nobody could get into them back then. And the federal government hung on to that model a little too long, focused more on compliance, auditors and inspector generals and FISMA and big, thick binders of policy things we told the user. Meanwhile, the threats were getting faster and faster. The users could write software. The vendors could update it faster. We fell behind the threat. So we had to hire more people to catch up to the bad guys who were hiring like crazy is really what it came down to. But the one thing I always point out is we started out by thinking it was the same model that we hired computer programmers by. They got a 4-year degree. We hired them in. They knew a particular language, and it was easy. The skills were pretty straightforward. But in security, you got to think like the bad guys do. You got to think creatively and have a whole different set of skills. And it took the federal government a lot of years to sort of catch on to that.
So what we have now is people apply for position, and they have something like artificial intelligence scan all the resumes. They look for bachelor's degree, look for certifications. And here's this guy, Pescatore. He doesn't have any bachelor's degree. He's got nothing. He may know 10 times as much as John Gilroy with the bachelor's degree in something or other. I mean, this is a confusing work environment. So where does SANS fit in trying to assist with the federal government, trying to figure out who knows what?
So SANS started out in 1989, basically. SANS, SANS used to stand for System Administrator Network Security. And it was basically our founder, Alan Powell, recognized back then, hey, this is like being a really skilled electrician or plumber. You have to know how to do stuff right. If your plumber had a 4-year degree and you had more leaks when he left leaks in the sink when he left the house than when he got to the house, that's not a good thing. So learning how to talk about plumbing isn't a help. Learning how to do plumbing is a help. That's what we're doing. That's what IT is. It's plumbing. It's electricity. It's not some paper-bound thing. So what SANS started way back then was sort of hands-on training. And Alan was a big proselytizer for that. But in more recent years, I helped Alan start a couple years ago here in the state of Maryland programs with community colleges. Because one thing community colleges recognized about 10, 15 years ago was that the growth in these MRI machines and CAT scan machines and all the medical machinery and IT being used in hospitals, they needed operators. They needed technicians who knew a little bit about the human body, but a whole lot about how the machines worked. They didn't need to be computer experts. They needed to be medically knowledgeable instrument experts. And they started doing 2-year certification programs for them. So when we started talking to in Maryland, the Maryland Community College in Montgomery County, they said, what you're describing is exactly what we learned back then. That's that type of things needed for cybersecurity. So that's what we've started by augmenting was with hand-on courses, and then this training people before they got a 4-year degree. They get a
Yeah.
2-year degree, get a certificate, take annual training to keep up with the change in threats and the change in technology. And then if they want to get a 4-year degree and move up to a management job where that required a university type degree in addition to your past knowledge, so much the better. And the federal government, in recent years has caught on to that with DoD 8041 and then this nice framework for computer employment. So it's cybersecurity employment. So it's good to see it coming together.
Yeah, if you read the news and keep up what's going on, there's something called the Pivot Act now, to PIVOTT. So what is that anyway?
Yeah, the Pivot Act is, when I saw the wording, my first thought was that's a clever use of getting a V in there because it's something like providing individuals various opportunities for technical
Yeah.
training. I'm like, well, you really had to work hard to get that V in the Pivot Act. But what it basically is doing is we feel like at SANS, it said, let's pass a law and the government will take what SANS did and drive it across the country. It basically says the government will provide scholarships, pay for 2-year training for people to get cyber, not just SANS ones, but any recognized 2-year cybersecurity training program to get 2-year hands-on degrees if they agree to a 2-year service requirement. They'll come and work for some government agency for 2 years. Because the government also, I left the federal government after about 5 years because salary was so much better in private industry. The government always has that
Yeah.
problem. So in this case, you get free 2 years of education at a 2-year college or a training institute that the government would pay for. Then you'd be indebted for 2 years of service, but you'd still be getting paid. You get a job.
Yeah.
And so SANS had been doing that with community colleges, and we'd gotten probably 30 out of the 50 states doing something with us. This would provide federal backing for that and access to federal type jobs. I think the Pivot Act focuses on the unclassified side of
Yeah.
the federal government, not DoD.
So there are some people that know SANS, some don't. So what SANS does not provide any kind of bachelor's degree or associate's degree. What it does is specialized individual courses, maybe directed at a certain activity. It may be a person with a master's degree in computer science wants to focus in on encryption or focus in on quantum or something. Is that kind of courses that you offer? Is that right?
For many years, that was true. All we did not, everything we did was oriented around you have people doing jobs in security.
Mm-hmm.
What hands-on skills do they need to do that job? Whether they're a manager, an analyst, a firewall operator. But then we started getting requests. Hey, my company still only promotes me if I get a 4-year degree. Can SANS give me a 4-year degree? So SANS actually does have a .edu component that's an accredited 4-year college for that as well. It's much smaller than our big hand. We've got about 90,000 alumni, current active certificates out there and train like 40, 50,000 people a year in individual courses. The EDU part's smaller, but yeah, we actually got pulled in by our customers into being an accredited college 4-year degree university as well.
Wow, I didn't realize that. So Pivot right now is a bill in Congress and it's being worked through. Is that where the status is?
Yeah, and if I had a nickel for every cybersecurity bill that was introduced in Congress over my career, I wouldn't even bother even talking to you. I'd be in
Yeah.
my own little island in the Caribbean somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's got, it's the latest of this type of thing. What we saw is the demand for it's there. It doesn't really matter if the federal government adds this amount of money they're doing. The states have this problem. Private industry has the same problem. The things we've done with community colleges that are like what the Pivot Act is going to do with the government, we had more employers waiting for them to get out of the program than we had kids coming out of the program.
Yeah.
It's really a demand-driven thing.
So what is the Cyber Workforce Academy? Separate category? What is it anyway?
Well, we had a separate initiative, and I'm horrible about keeping up with product names of these things, what we ended up calling them. But what SANS started years ago was working with companies that had needs for people, cybersecurity trained people, and then working with the military for people leaving the military and providing them with free training. SANS would do that. And then we found out that it had to be two things. Had to be hands-on training, certainly. That's core key, not just PowerPoint. It had to be doing things on active, test ranges and systems and things. But also it was very key that not everybody could do this. Not everybody could be a successful cybersecurity engineer. So it used to be that community colleges had to take everybody. Nobody ever got turned away from a community college. When they started doing the certification medical machinery people, they said, oh, some people can't do this. You got to understand how a computer works inside this machine. You got to know a little bit about this, and then be able to do that. So many community colleges that did provide 2-year programs for medical hospital machinery type people jumped on this model and they said, "Oh, good. Can you give us something so we can determine if somebody's able to succeed at this?" So we added kind of a game component to it.
Yeah.
Kids can sit down, or kids coming out of the military aren't always kids, but kids coming out of high school or returning military can play this game. It's like protect against the hackers stealing the trees in Norway or various
Yeah.
things like that. And if they can't succeed at that game, achieve a certain score, we know they would not pass our entry level course. And we can say, either you got to do some more hands-on stuff or you're really not cut out for this. But 70 to 80% of them can pass it. Then they get the 2-year degree and then they go right to work as a startup intern analyst. And the key we found was the companies will pay them to work. It's not like a free internship.
Yeah.
People come back from the military can't afford to work for free. They have
Yeah.
bills to pay, things, families. So the Cyber Academy was the broader name for doing that, both with community colleges and the military. And then we also provided a module where companies could do it themselves, run that type of thing themselves. Because quite often in private industry, human resources owns all the training money. And they want to make decisions on how to do it versus
Yeah.
let the security people do it directly.
John, this is an audio podcast, so people can't see you. I'm looking at you on Zoom here. There's a window behind you. And I'm sure if you looked out the window, you'd see this big 100-foot wave, and it has AI on it. It's about to wash you right out to the middle of the ocean somewhere. And well, that's the answer. What do you need 500,000 people to work in cybersecurity? Why do you even need a SANS Institute? Just let, I'm going to try to say this without laughing. Just let artificial intelligence jump in here. Doesn't have all the answers. I mean, it's everything, right?
Well, so here's the simple model I use. We talked about a shortage of cybersecurity people or gaps, need to hire people. So let's say I have 10 cybersecurity people and I think I need 20. I'd say that's my number. Can't I just use AI, give the first 10 people AI,
That's it. That's the answer, man.
and I don't need anybody?
Yeah, it's easy.
Here's the problem. And what's funny is I had left NSA and I was working for cybersecurity. No, I was working for GTE, was an old phone company at the time, became Verizon that people know today. And we had a big lab that was doing AI work back in the 70s and 80s. And it never lived up to what it was talking about back then. So you
Yeah.
never heard it called that again. It became called machine learning and other things for a while. Now all of a sudden you hear it again. But the key thing is there is no successful use of AI you can find that doesn't involve the use of a domain specialist.
Mm-hmm.
If you pour a lot of data into the top of these things and just say, look at that data and find something, if you pour garbage in, it finds garbage and feeds you garbage out. So we've seen
Yeah.
that already with these large language model type, like the chat GPI and things that's all over the press. It's fun. It can, maybe it's better than a Google search, but it cannot do what human beings can do. It doesn't even pretend to be. The one I was doing a talk to up on Capitol Hill, actually, it was a lunchtime type thing to the congressmen involved in legislature. Their aides would hold these lunchtime things. We'd come in on the topic du jour, and they were interested in AI. And this was their topic of interest was, oh, with these large language models, they're giving all these answers. So do you realize how often they give you a totally wrong answer? And I told them, I said, if you only remember one thing from this lunch, notice that every time you see AI gives you an answer, at the bottom it includes a disclaimer. And at the bottom
Yeah.
says, none of this may be true, what I said up above above this line. So we have three issues with AI and security. One is, can we use it for skilled analysts to do more? And that part we can do. A skilled analyst can use AI tools and classify things and hand them off to lesser skilled analysts. That's a really good use of AI. So I thought I needed 10 people. Maybe I only need 8 more people when I use that. But the second thing is the bad guys are using AI against us. And I think we'll give you the URL at the end, but SANS just participated in the RSA conference on the top threats facing everybody. And for three,
Hmm.
4 years in a row, we've done these great highlights of AI-based threats and how AI is being used to write evil code software by people who don't even know how to code. So the threats of AI being used against us, it's an arm race. We got more
Yeah.
efficient using it, so do the bad guys.
Yeah.
What I think is the most important part, I did like a global talk to a very large soda company. And one of their top things was, we're making big bets on using AI in our business to more efficiently spend our marketing money, to more efficiently make recommendations in product line. How do we make sure we're not giving away trade secrets in our own use of AI? How do we know? How do we protect the mission side, which is
Yeah.
using AI?
Yeah.
And then so we got the three things: us using AI productivity, the bad guys using AI productivity against us is almost invariably going to wash out. But now we have this added load of being able to secure the use of AI, which requires the same basic security skills, but some domain knowledge about AI.
Yeah.
So I'll end with an old example. When I worked for the phone company, we had one use of AI in all of the US, of course, GT's telephone companies, and was in Florida. They were using something they called AI to pre-position repair trucks when thunderstorms came through and knocked the telephone lines down. So we sent a team down there to go find a domain, and they said, "Oh, that's Fred. Talk to Fred." Fred said, "Here, come in the break room with me." We went in the break room, and on the wall was a weather map on a TV screen. He said, "I noticed this thing has radar, and I could come in here and see, oh, look, the storm's going this way. I go back in the other room and I tell the trucks, you go that way. You get ahead of the storm because that's where the damage will be."
Yeah.
So that was AI. That was what was
Yeah.
called AI. And that's really what it is today. Find somebody who solved the problem and then find a way to get the computer to look at the data and realize it's the same problem and recommend the same solution.
Yeah.
That's still requires domain expertise.
I have a friend named Rob Pigoraro, and he talks about the whack-a-mole game. Yeah, and that's what we have here. This is the 1960s, little fundraiser at a church with your whack-a-mole. You hit one, and it comes up. So you got to add, it comes up. So it's a challenge. So from the perspective of someone listening to this podcast, what they can do is they can sharpen their skills by taking courses at SANS, or maybe signing up for a certification at SANS, or maybe contacting you and saying, "Hey, here's a position I'm in. What's next? What should I look out for?" It's at the point now where there's no textbooks on this. There's no written by Pescatore. No. There's no ink in this. It's like, well, call me next week. It's such a dynamic situation, so fluid. I don't know how SANS can even offer a course. It must be changing quarterly.
Well, the good thing is, both in the civilian side and like the DoD side, they've sort of settled on common job names at least.
Thank goodness.
So job categories in cybersecurity that map to skills, that map to foundation knowledge, map to work experience, and can map to certifications. So we can say, without a doubt, every security team needs some certain core skills. For example, the ability to determine if an IT system has well-known vulnerabilities, vulnerability assessment, penetration testing. That's always going to be needed to be done. In the old days of the railroads, when they built a bridge, They had to span the Patuxent River, the Potomac River, a big bridge. They weren't really sure how to make a bridge strong enough for the load, but they had some ideas and they'd build a bridge. Then they would run a bunch of locomotives on the bridge and see if it fell down. And there's pictures of entire towns coming out under, women under parasols and men with their fedoras on, waiting to see if the bridge would fall down. That's where we are in IT operations and software today. It's really hard to test if it's secure enough. Penetration testing, pretending to be bad guys, that's been one of the core big demand areas of SANS training because it's proven so valuable. Find the holes in your systems before the bad guys do. We know that needs to happen. That's one of the holes you can say, no more moles are going to jump out of that hole.
Yeah.
I can now focus on the other holes with my hammers. And the
Yeah.
next thing is to say, can we change whack-a-mole into more like chess? And, where we think ahead in all the moves. And I'll give you a flat-out answer. The answer is no. Chess is a bounded game. Computers are great at chess. The
Yeah.
pieces that horse, I can never remember, what's the knight. The
Yeah.
knight can only jump over two and over one kind of moves.
Yeah.
The diagonal one can only go diagonally. The bad guys in cybersecurity, they can go wherever they can come out from the bottom of the board. There's no
Yeah.
boundaries. So it's not we're going to be in whack-a-mole for a long time to come because software presents endless opportunities for vulnerabilities.
I
So
want to I want to talk about software. I learned a phrase this morning about software. A lot of software developers are using, guess what? Artificial intelligence to create code. In fact, there's a big chunk of venture-based companies that are actually founded by individuals that don't know how to write code. They just get online and put something together and call it ABC company, whatever. And so the phrase that's used in this, but it's called vibe coding. I don't know if you've heard about this. And it's where someone who may not have a deep, like you have a very deep and thorough understanding knowledge of software development, but there are people that don't. And, from you and I have been around, what could possibly go wrong? Well, this seems like it's just an opportunity for someone to attack someone.
well, you always use the line. My grandfather came over from Italy back in right after World War One, I guess that would be. And he landed on in New York City, went to Times Square, and fell for a three-card Monte scam and lost
Oh,
half his
yeah.
money.
Ah,
So here, 100 years later, we're still falling for phishing attacks and ransomware and all those same type of scams promising it. We're a hopeful species. People always hope for the best. Bad guys take advantage of it. We always hope that we can do things in software, and you can. But my father was a mechanic, and he used to say, it's obvious that none of the car engineers who designed these cars ever took care of a car, ever had to repair a car, or they wouldn't have had all these things in my way to get to what needed to be fixed. So
yeah.
software needs to be maintainable, and to be secure, it has to be inspected before it's put out. So that's kind of a thing. We got in behind the eight ball here. The technology industry, the software industry has fought back any liability they might have for vulnerabilities in their code. It's all up to us to patch our own software. Imagine if the Subaru told me, oh, by the way, there's a recall on your car. We're going to send you a bunch of parts. Fix your car. What? What are you talking about? You should give me you do it. Yeah, that's what recalls are about. So bottom line is vulnerabilities are always going to be there in software for a long time to come.
So John, we're running out of time here. I got a kind of open-ended question for you. So let's say you're working for the federal government agency and you have a staff and you want to retain your people. So what recommendations do you have for federal leaders to secure their good people on their staff?
So yeah, this is a tough time in the federal government, obviously, with a lot of
Yeah.
uncertainty going on. So it makes it even harder. And like I said,
Yeah.
there's salary incentives for people to leave. I think there's a couple of things we've seen. SANS has done a lot of studies and surveys on this. So one thing is you have these different roles in your security team. If people get in a role where they don't see an advancement or change or challenge, they're much more likely to leave, whether it's
Yep.
government or private industry. I mean, salary is one part of it, but loving your job, enjoying your job. I've worked in this field for 40 years because it's a whole lot of fun. It can be fun, it can be rewarding, but if you're stuck doing nothing but reading down alert lines on a screen, so rotate people through positions. Let the ones doing vulnerability testing or pen testing take a side of running the firewall so they understand the challenges of stopping bad guys or keeping things secure enough to stop bad guys. Let the ones doing nothing but updating software work somewhere else. So rotating around the staff kind of thing. Second thing is, anytime you hear about a new technology, give your staff some training time to come up to speed on that technology before, as quickly as the bad guys do. AI's
Yeah.
to this example. Encryption is the one I'm pointing out today. There's going to be a bigger and bigger role for data encryption that we don't do today of routinely encrypting emails and things. If we move away from passwords, from reusable passwords to these things, phishing resistant credentials or the password tokens and things you see now, let them experiment with that. Let them do test bed prototyping of that. So they feel like they're moving things forward, not just coming into work to fall behind the alerts again.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds like being sensitive to these little critters called human beings and their desires and needs. And I think that's really good advice. Well, I appreciate
And
all your insights. Say now, if you're at the gym and listening to this podcast, or I don't know, walking your dog, you can go to federaltechpodcast.com and type in SANS, SANS, and I'll have a link to their site and all the different courses that they offer. And I think what's interesting about your organization is that you can be an 18-year-old kid in a community college and benefit from. You can be like a 10-year experienced person and benefit from SANS. And you can be grizzled, beat-up old veteran who maybe doesn't understand quantum and says, "Hey, Big John, how do I figure out this quantum stuff?" So it's like universities. I think of like young people, but this is like a multi-generational library or storage of information for different skill sets. And even someone who's been in the business 30 or 40 years. What about post-quantum encryption? I mean, this is a brand new topic, isn't it?
And what we find in our courses, all of our courses have a hands-on component. There's usually like a
Good.
lab in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Half the students come back and say, well, the instructor was great, but the lab in the afternoon where I got to work with other people in the class and we got to ask each other and learn from each other, that was just as valuable. So
Yeah.
you always find in any environment where people are creating something versus just sitting back and leaning back and absorbing something, that they're acting as co-instructors the whole time.
Yeah, that was great. Well, thank you very much. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, John Pescatore, Director of Emerging Security Trends at SANS.